The summer heat was unbearable that Tuesday evening. Detective Ryan Mitchell wiped the sweat from his forehead as he sat in his patrol car, parked strategically at the corner of Highway 47 and Baker Street. This was his favorite spot. He could see everything from here, and more importantly, everyone could see him. That's what he wanted. He wanted people to know he was watching. Ryan had been with the Millbrook Police Department for 15 years. 15 long years of climbing the ladder, making connections, and building a reputation that made him practically untouchable in this small town. The mayor knew him by name. The district attorney played golf with him on weekends. Even the judge at the county courthouse would nod and smile when Ryan walked into the courtroom. He had worked hard for this power, and he wasn't shy about using it. His radio crackled with routine chatter, but Ryan wasn't really listening. He was thinking about his upcoming promotion. Captain Mitchell. It had a nice ring to it. Just a few more months of playing the game, keeping his numbers up, and that promotion would be his. He needed more citations, more arrests, more proof that he was keeping Millbrook safe. Or at least that's what he told himself. That's when he saw the silver sedan drive past. The car itself wasn't remarkable. It was clean, well-maintained, probably a few years old. But Ryan's trained eye caught something. The right taillight had a small crack in it. Barely noticeable, really. Most officers would have let it slide. But Ryan wasn't most officers. He saw an opportunity. He flipped on his lights and pulled out onto the highway. The sedan continued for a moment before the driver noticed and pulled over to the shoulder. Ryan took his time approaching the vehicle. He always did. It was part of his strategy. Make them wait. Make them nervous. Nervous people made mistakes, and mistakes gave him more reasons to dig deeper. He walked up to the driver's side window, his hand resting casually on his belt, right next to his badge. The window rolled down, and he found himself looking at a woman in her mid-30s. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and wore a simple t-shirt and jeans. Her expression was calm, maybe even a little tired. "License and registration," Ryan said flatly, not bothering with pleasantries. The woman reached for her glove compartment slowly, carefully. "May I ask why you pulled me over, officer?" Ryan didn't like that question. He never liked it when people questioned him. "I'll tell you after I see your documents." She handed him her license and registration without another word. Ryan studied them under his flashlight. Her name was Jennifer Hayes. Address showed she lived on the east side of town, the nicer part. Her license was current, no obvious issues. But Ryan wasn't done yet. "Do you know your right tail light is broken?" he asked. Jennifer turned to look, squinting in the fading daylight. "I didn't realize. It must have just happened. I'll get it fixed tomorrow." "That's a safety violation," Ryan said, already writing in his citation book. "You're driving an unsafe vehicle on public roads." "I understand, officer. Like I said, I'll take care of it first thing in the morning." Ryan looked up from his notepad. Something about her tone bothered him. She wasn't scared. She wasn't apologizing profusely like most people did. She was just accepting the situation. Too calm, too composed. "Step out of the vehicle, please," he said suddenly. Jennifer's eyebrows raised slightly. "Excuse me?" "I said step out of the vehicle. I need to conduct a safety check." "A safety check for a broken taillight?" Jennifer asked, her voice still even but with a hint of something Ryan couldn't quite identify. "Is that standard procedure?" There it was again. That questioning. Ryan felt his jaw tighten. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask you again. Step out of the vehicle." Jennifer took a deep breath and complied. She stood beside her car, hands visible at her sides. Ryan walked around the vehicle slowly, peering into the windows with his flashlight. The car was clean. Almost too clean. No fast food bags, no clutter, nothing out of place. "I'm going to need to search your vehicle," Ryan announced. "Do you have probable cause?" Jennifer asked. Ryan's head snapped up. "What did you say?" "I asked if you have probable cause to search my vehicle. I haven't committed any crime beyond a broken taillight, which is an equipment violation, not a criminal offense. Under the Fourth Amendment, you need either my consent or probable cause to conduct a search." Ryan felt his face getting hot. This woman was quoting the Constitution at him. In 15 years, he could count on one hand how many times someone had done that. And he had made each one of those people regret it. "Are you refusing to cooperate with a police investigation?" he asked, his voice taking on a harder edge. "I'm not refusing anything," Jennifer said calmly. "I'm simply asking you to follow proper legal procedure. I don't consent to a search of my vehicle. Ryan stared at her for a long moment. Then he noticed something. She had her phone in her hand and it was pointed at him. Are you recording this? He demanded. I am. It's my legal right to record any interaction with law enforcement in a public space. That was it. Ryan had had enough. This woman clearly thought she was smarter than him. She thought she could embarrass him, make him look bad, maybe even get him in trouble. Well, she had picked the wrong cop to mess with. Put the phone away, he ordered. I have the legal right to put it away now, or I'll charge you with obstruction of justice. Jennifer didn't move. Recording you isn't obstruction. Multiple court cases have established that. That's it, Ryan cut her off. He pulled out his citation book again, writing furiously. You're getting cited for the taillight, for your inspection sticker being expired. My inspection isn't expired, Jennifer interrupted. It's valid for another 2 months. Ryan looked at the sticker on her windshield. She was right. But he had already started writing and he wasn't about to back down now. The sticker is faded and illegible. That's a violation. And you're getting cited for obstruction of justice for refusing to cooperate with a lawful police investigation. He tore the citations from his book and thrust them toward Jennifer. She took them, glancing at each one carefully. Ryan could see her jaw working, like she was biting back words. Good. Let her be angry. Let her learn that in Millbrook you didn't question Detective Ryan Mitchell. You have a court date in 3 weeks, Ryan said, tapping the bottom of the citations. I suggest you get yourself a lawyer. You're going to need one. Jennifer looked up at him, and for the first time Ryan saw something in her eyes. It wasn't fear or anger. It was something else. Something that made him slightly uncomfortable, though he would never admit it. I'll be there, she said quietly. You can count on that. Ryan watched as she got back in her car and drove away, her broken taillight disappearing into the dusk. He stood there for a moment, then walked back to his patrol car with a satisfied smile. Another citation on the books. Another reminder to everyone in Millbrook that he was in charge. He had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He had no idea that the woman he had just pulled over wasn't just any random driver. And he definitely had no idea that in 3 weeks when he walked into that courtroom, his entire world was about to come crashing down. But Jennifer knew. As she drove home, hands steady on the wheel, she was already planning her next move. Because Ryan Mitchell wasn't the only one with 15 years of experience. And unlike him, Jennifer had spent those years learning how to take down people who thought they were above the law. Jennifer didn't sleep much that night. She kept replaying the traffic stop in her mind, analyzing every word, every gesture, every violation of proper procedure. By the time the sun came up, she had already made her decision. This wasn't going to end with just paying a fine and moving on. This was bigger than her. She spent the morning at her home office, which was really just a spare bedroom filled with law books and case files. For the past 6 months, Jennifer had been taking a break from her regular work. Not because she wanted to, but because she needed to. Her last case had been brutal. She had spent 2 years fighting a major lawsuit against a police department in another state. And when it was finally over, when justice had finally been served, she was exhausted, burned out. Her colleagues had told her to take time off, to rest, to remember why she became a lawyer in the first place. But as she sat at her desk that morning, staring at the 3 citations Ryan Mitchell had given her, Jennifer felt that familiar fire igniting in her chest. She knew exactly why she became a lawyer. It was for moments like this. Her first step was simple. She went online and filed a formal complaint with the Millbrook Police Department. She detailed everything that had happened during the traffic stop. The illegal search attempt, the false citation for an expired inspection, the threat to charge her with obstruction for simply exercising her constitutional rights. She attached the video from her phone as evidence. Then she did something that most people wouldn't think to do. She filed a Freedom of Information Act request. She wanted every document related to her traffic stop. Every report Ryan had written, every piece of paperwork. She also requested his personnel file, his training records, and any complaints that had been filed against him in the past. It was a fishing expedition, sure, but Jennifer had learned long ago that when you're dealing with someone who abuses their power, you're rarely dealing with a first-time offender. While she waited for responses, Jennifer decided to do some investigating of her own. She started by simply talking to people. She went to the coffee shop on Main Street, the one where locals gathered every morning. She didn't ask direct questions at first. She just listened. And what she heard was troubling. "Oh yeah, Detective Mitchell," an older man said when Jennifer casually mentioned getting pulled over. "He got my grandson last year. Said he was speeding, but my grandson swears he wasn't. Gave him 4 different tickets. Cost us nearly $800. A woman at the next table leaned over. "He pulled me over about 6 months ago. Kept asking to search my car. I said no, and he got real aggressive about it. Made me sit on the side of the road for almost an hour while he called for backup to verify my registration. It was humiliating." The more Jennifer listened, the more stories she heard, and a pattern started to emerge. Ryan Mitchell had a habit of targeting certain people, women driving alone, young men, especially those who looked like they might be from out of town, anyone who looked different or didn't fit the typical Millbrook profile. And his tactics were always the same: intimidation, unnecessary searches, stacking citations for minor violations. Jennifer started keeping notes. She created a spreadsheet on her laptop, tracking every story she heard: names, dates, types of violations, outcomes. By the end of the first week, she had documented over 20 cases that sounded suspicious. But hearing stories wasn't enough. She needed evidence. She needed people willing to go on record. That's when she started making phone calls. She tracked down people who had been cited by Ryan Mitchell in the past year. Some were hesitant to talk. Others hung up as soon as she mentioned the detective's name. But a few were willing to share their experiences. And those stories were even worse than what she had heard at the coffee shop. A young teacher named Beth told Jennifer about being pulled over late at night. Ryan had claimed her car matched the description of a vehicle involved in a robbery. He made her get out of the car, searched her vehicle without consent, and questioned her for over 30 minutes before finally letting her go with a warning. Beth had been terrified. She said she didn't report it because she was afraid of retaliation. After all, Ryan was a detective. Who would believe her over him? An older gentleman named Robert described being stopped for allegedly rolling through a stop sign. Ryan had become hostile when Robert questioned whether he had actually done it. The situation escalated, and Ryan ended up citing him for 5 different violations, including one for having an air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. Robert fought the citations in court, and 4 of them were dismissed. But by then, he had already paid a lawyer and taken time off work. It had cost him more than just money. It had cost him his peace of mind. The more people Jennifer talked to, the angrier she became. But she kept her emotions in check. She had learned a long time ago that anger without strategy was useless. She needed to be smart about this. She needed to build an airtight case. 3 weeks into her investigation, Jennifer received a response to her Freedom of Information Act request. Well, part of a response. The police department sent her the basic incident report from her traffic stop, but most of the other documents she requested were either heavily redacted or denied entirely. They claimed that Ryan's personnel file was protected. The complaint records were confidential. That releasing certain information would compromise ongoing investigations. Jennifer smiled when she read the denial letter. She had expected this. In fact, she had counted on it. Because now she had proof that they were hiding something. And, more importantly, she had grounds to push harder. She filed an appeal, citing specific legal precedents that required the disclosure of the information she had requested. She also sent a letter directly to the police chief, outlining her concerns about Detective Mitchell's conduct and the pattern of behavior she had uncovered. She made it clear that she wasn't just some angry citizen complaining about a ticket. She was an attorney with significant experience in civil rights law, and she was prepared to take this as far as it needed to go. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell was having the time of his life. He had no idea what Jennifer was doing. As far as he was concerned, she was just another person who had learned not to mess with him. He bragged to his fellow officers about the traffic stop, laughing about how this woman tried to quote the Constitution at him like she was some kind of legal expert. "She's gonna show up in court thinking she's smart," he told his partner over lunch one day. "Judge Thompson will take one look at those citations and tell her to pay the fine." End of story. His partner, a younger officer named David, didn't laugh. "I don't know, man. You said she was recording you. What if she tries to make something out of it?" Ryan waved his hand dismissively. "So what? I didn't do anything wrong. I pulled her over for a legitimate violation, and she refused to cooperate. Everything I did was by the book. But it wasn't by the book, and deep down Ryan knew it. He had bent the rules before and nothing had ever happened. The department always backed him up. The district attorney never questioned his citations. The judges trusted his word. He had a reputation, and that reputation was his shield. What Ryan didn't understand was that reputations can be destroyed, and Jennifer was about to show him exactly how that happens. As the court date approached, Jennifer prepared her case methodically. She reviewed every piece of evidence, practiced her arguments, and reached out to more people who had been stopped by Ryan. She was building something bigger than just a defense against 3 traffic citations. She was building a case against a system that had allowed one man to abuse his power for years without consequences. The night before the court hearing, Jennifer sat in her office and looked at everything she had compiled. File folders full of statements, videos, documents, a timeline of Ryan Mitchell's misconduct stretching back years. It was overwhelming, but it was also empowering. She wasn't going into that courtroom alone. She was going in with the voices of everyone Ryan had wronged, everyone who had been too afraid to speak up. She picked up the 3 citations he had given her and read them one more time. Then she smiled. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. Very interesting. The courtroom was quiet when Jennifer arrived that morning. Too quiet. She had expected more people, more noise, more energy. But it was just her, a handful of other people waiting for their cases to be called, and the usual court staff shuffling papers and preparing for the day ahead. She wore a navy blue suit and carried a leather briefcase that looked expensive because it was. First impressions mattered, and Jennifer wanted everyone in that courtroom to know she wasn't just another defendant hoping for mercy. She found a seat in the back and waited, watching as other cases were called and resolved. Most of them lasted less than 5 minutes. Guilty plea, fine paid. Next case. Ryan Mitchell walked in about 20 minutes later. He was in uniform, his badge polished and catching the fluorescent lights overhead. He didn't look at Jennifer. He didn't even seem to notice she was there. He walked straight to the front of the courtroom and took a seat next to the prosecutor, a middle-aged woman named Carol Peterson, who Jennifer recognized from her research. Carol and Ryan chatted casually like old friends catching up over coffee. Jennifer watched them carefully. This was exactly what she had expected, the system protecting itself. The prosecutor and the cop working together, comfortable in their routine. They had done this dance 1,000 times before. Citizen gets ticket. Citizen pays fine or fights and loses. System wins. Everyone goes home, not today. Case number 4723, the bailiff called out. The state versus Jennifer Hayes. Jennifer stood and walked to the front of the courtroom. Ryan finally looked at her and she saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. Then came the smirk. That confident, arrogant smirk that told her he thought this was already over. Judge Thompson, a gray-haired man in his 60s, glanced at the paperwork in front of him. Ms. Hayes, you're charged with 3 violations. Operating a vehicle with a defective taillight, displaying an expired inspection sticker, and obstruction of justice. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor, Jennifer said clearly. And I'm requesting a full trial on all charges. The judge raised his eyebrows slightly. Carol Peterson looked annoyed. Ryan's smirk faded just a little. Ms. Hayes, the judge said, these are minor traffic violations. Are you sure you want to go through a full trial? It would be much simpler to just— I'm certain, Your Honor, Jennifer interrupted politely. I believe these charges are without merit, and I intend to prove that. Judge Thompson sighed and made a note on his papers. Very well. We'll schedule a trial date. Is there anything else? Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to file a motion to dismiss all charges based on Fourth Amendment violations and improper procedure. Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick document. I've prepared a written motion with supporting evidence and legal precedents. I also have video documentation of the entire traffic stop. The mood in the courtroom shifted. Carol Peterson sat up straighter. Ryan's face lost some of its color. Judge Thompson looked genuinely interested for the first time since Jennifer had walked in. Approach the bench, the judge said. Jennifer walked forward with her motion. Carol Peterson joined her, looking increasingly uncomfortable. The judge took the document and began flipping through it. His eyes moved quickly over the pages and Jennifer could see him processing what he was reading. You have video evidence? He asked. Yes, Your Honor. I recorded the entire interaction on my phone, which is my legal right under the First Amendment. The video clearly shows that Detective Mitchell attempted to conduct an illegal search of my vehicle without probable cause or consent. It also shows that he issued a citation for an expired inspection sticker when my inspection is actually valid for another 2 months, and it documents his threat to charge me with obstruction simply because I was exercising my constitutional rights. Carol Peterson leaned in. Your Honor, if I may, we haven't had a chance to review this evidence or... The evidence was submitted with my formal complaint to the police department 3 weeks ago, Jennifer said calmly. I also sent a copy directly to the district attorney's office via certified mail. I have the receipt if you need to see it. Judge Thompson looked at Carol. Did you receive this? Carol's face went red. I'll need to check with my office, and you might want to do that, the judge said dryly. He looked back at Jennifer. Ms. Hayes, are you an attorney? I am, Your Honor. I specialize in civil rights law. Ryan shifted in his seat. Jennifer didn't look at him, but she could feel his discomfort from across the courtroom. Your Honor, Jennifer continued, I'd also like to inform the court that I'll be filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against Detective Mitchell and the Millbrook Police Department under Section 1983. This hearing and all testimony given here will be part of the official record. For that case, the courtroom went completely silent. Judge Thompson set down the motion and looked at Jennifer for a long moment. Then he looked at Ryan, then back at Jennifer. Ms. Hayes, I'm going to take this motion under advisement. I want to review the video evidence and your legal arguments carefully. I'm also going to order the prosecution to produce all documentation related to this traffic stop, including any dashcam footage from Detective Mitchell's vehicle. Your Honor, Carol protested. I don't care what we typically do. Judge Thompson cut her off. If Ms. Hayes is making allegations of constitutional violations, I want to see all the evidence. From both sides, he looked at Ryan directly. Detective Mitchell, did your vehicle have a functioning dashcam on the night in question? Ryan stood up slowly. Yes, sir. Then I want that footage submitted to the court within 48 hours. Am I clear? Yes, sir. Judge Thompson made several notes on his papers. I'm going to schedule a hearing for 2 weeks from today to address this motion to dismiss. At that time, we'll review all evidence and determine whether these charges have merit. Ms. Hayes, you'll submit any additional documentation you want the court to consider by the end of this week. Yes, Your Honor. Court is adjourned on this matter. He banged his gavel. Jennifer gathered her papers and put them back in her briefcase. She could feel eyes on her from all over the courtroom. The other defendants waiting for their cases looked shocked. The court staff whispered to each other, but Jennifer kept her expression neutral and professional. As she turned to leave, Carol Peterson stepped in front of her. Ms. Hayes, can we talk for a moment? Of course. They walked to a quiet corner of the hallway outside the courtroom. Carol looked stressed, her earlier confidence completely gone. Look, she said quietly, I had no idea about any of this. I handle hundreds of traffic cases. I don't personally review every single one before trial. I understand, Jennifer said, but that's part of the problem, isn't it? These cases get rubber-stamped through the system because everyone assumes the police are always right. Carol opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She knew Jennifer was right. If the charges are dropped, Carol said carefully, would you reconsider the federal lawsuit? No, Jennifer said firmly, because this isn't just about me. I've documented over 30 similar cases involving Detective Mitchell over the past 3 years. Illegal searches, false citations, intimidation. He's been doing this for a long time and everyone has been looking the other way. Carol's eyes widened. 30 cases? At least. Probably more. And I have witnesses willing to testify. People who were too scared to speak up before but are ready to tell their stories now. Carol looked like she might be sick. Ms. Hayes, if even half of what you're saying is true? It's all true, Jennifer said. And you're going to have to decide which side of this you want to be on. You can keep defending the indefensible, or you can help make sure this never happens to anyone else. Before Carol could respond, Ryan Mitchell walked out of the courtroom. He saw Jennifer and Carol talking and his jaw clenched. He walked past them without a word, but Jennifer could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were balled into fists. Good. Let him be angry. Let him be scared. He should be. Jennifer left the courthouse and walked to her car. The morning sun was bright and she took a moment to just breathe. The first battle was over and she had won. Not the war, not yet, but this was a good start. She pulled out her phone and started making calls. She had 2 weeks to prepare for the next hearing, and she wasn't going to waste a single moment. She called the witnesses she had been interviewing, letting them know what had happened in court. She called other attorneys she knew who had experience with police misconduct cases. She reached out to a local investigative reporter who had been following corruption issues in small-town police departments. By the time she got home, Jennifer had a plan. And more importantly, she had momentum. The system had protected Ryan Mitchell for years, but that protection was starting to crack. And once it started cracking, Jennifer knew from experience it wouldn't take much to bring the whole thing crashing down. The news spread through Millbrook like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone seemed to know that Detective Ryan Mitchell was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind that didn't just go away with a slap on the wrist or a quiet transfer to another department. Jennifer filed her federal lawsuit exactly 1 week after the court hearing. It was comprehensive, detailed, and devastating. The complaint named Ryan Mitchell as the primary defendant, but it also named the Millbrook Police Department and the town itself. She included testimony from 14 witnesses, people who had been stopped, searched, intimidated, or falsely cited by Ryan over the past 3 years. She attached video evidence, photographs, citation records, and a timeline that showed a clear pattern of misconduct. But Jennifer didn't stop there. She also included evidence that the police department had ignored multiple complaints about Ryan's behavior. 3 separate citizens had filed formal complaints in the past 2 years. All 3 complaints had been investigated internally, and all 3 had been dismissed with findings of no misconduct. Jennifer had obtained copies of those complaint files through her FOIA request, and they painted a damning picture of a department more interested in protecting its own than serving the public. The local newspaper picked up the story first. The headline read, "Veteran Detective Faces Federal Civil Rights Lawsuit." The article outlined the basic allegations and mentioned that more than a dozen people had come forward with similar stories. By noon, the regional news stations had picked it up. By evening, it was trending on social media. Ryan's phone started ringing off the hook. Reporters wanted comments. His supervisors wanted meetings. Even some of his fellow officers started calling, asking what was going on, whether the allegations were true, whether they needed to be worried about their own interactions with him. Ryan didn't answer most of the calls. He sat in his living room watching the news coverage with a growing sense of dread. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was the one with power. He was the one people were afraid of. How had it all turned around so quickly? The police chief called him in for a meeting on Monday morning. Chief Patterson was a heavyset man with graying hair and a reputation for being tough but fair. He had always supported Ryan in the past, had always backed him up when questions arose. But today, when Ryan walked into his office, the chief's expression was cold. "Sit down," Chief Patterson said without any greeting. Ryan sat. He tried to maintain his usual confidence, but it was harder than he expected. "I've reviewed the lawsuit," the chief said, tossing a thick document across his desk. "I've also reviewed the dashcam footage from your traffic stop with Ms. Hayes, and I've gone back through your arrest and citation records for the past 3 years. Ryan felt his stomach drop. "Chief, I can explain." "Explain what, exactly?" Chief Patterson leaned back in his chair. "Explain why you attempted an illegal search? Explain why you issued a false citation for an expired inspection. Explain why there are 14 different people claiming you violated their rights." "Those people are lying," Ryan said quickly. "They're criminals who got caught and now they're trying to—" "Not all of them are criminals, Ryan. Some of them have never even had a parking ticket. Some of them are teachers, business owners, people with clean records who have no reason to lie." The chief rubbed his temples like he had a headache. "And the dashcam footage doesn't lie. I watched it. You were out of line." "I was doing my job," Ryan protested. "That woman was being uncooperative. She was refusing to—" "She was exercising her constitutional rights," the chief interrupted. "And you punished her for it. That's not police work, Ryan. That's abuse of power." The words hung in the air between them. Ryan wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but for the first time in his career, he didn't know what to say. "I'm placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately," Chief Patterson said. "You'll turn in your badge and your weapon. You'll have no contact with any witnesses or anyone involved in this case, and you'll make yourself available for the internal investigation that's about to start." Internal investigation? Ryan's voice cracked slightly. Did you think this was just going to go away? We have a federal lawsuit, Ryan. The state attorney general's office has already called me. They're looking into whether there are criminal charges to be filed. Criminal charges. Do you understand how serious this is? Ryan did understand. Finally, horribly, he understood. This wasn't just about losing his job. This was about potentially losing everything. His career, his reputation, maybe even his freedom. He handed over his badge and weapon like a man in a dream. Everything felt surreal, like it was happening to someone else. When he walked out of the police station that day, he could feel every officer watching him. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked relieved, like they had been waiting for this moment. A few looked scared, probably wondering if they would be next. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare for Ryan. Everywhere he went in Millbrook, people stared. Some whispered. Others openly talked about what they had heard, adding their own stories to the growing list of his alleged misconduct. The local diner where he used to eat lunch every day suddenly had no available tables when he walked in. The grocery store checkout clerk who used to chat with him now avoided eye contact. His lawyer, a man named Greg Phillips who handled most of the police union's legal issues, tried to be optimistic. "We can fight this," Greg told him during their first meeting. "It's her word against yours in a lot of these cases. We'll discredit the witnesses. We'll argue that you were just doing your job." But even Greg sounded uncertain. And when Jennifer released a statement to the press outlining even more evidence she had gathered, including testimony from former officers who had witnessed Ryan's behavior, Greg's optimism evaporated entirely. "Ryan," Greg said during their third meeting, "we need to talk about a settlement." "A settlement? I'm not admitting I did anything wrong. You might not have a choice. The evidence against you is substantial. The department is distancing themselves from you. The prosecutor's office has stopped taking your calls. And now the state attorney general wants to interview you about potential criminal violations." Greg leaned forward. "If this goes to trial, you could lose everything. Your pension, your freedom, everything." Ryan stared at the wall behind Greg's head. His mind was racing but going nowhere. How had it come to this? He had been so careful. He had always stayed just within the boundaries, or at least he thought he had. He had never beaten anyone. He had never planted evidence. He had just used his authority to keep order, to make sure people knew who was in charge. But looking back now, he could see how it had escalated. One questionable stop had led to another. One illegal search had become routine. One false citation had turned into dozens. He had convinced himself it was all justified, that he was just being thorough, that he was keeping Millbrook safe. But the truth was simpler and uglier. He had liked the power. He had liked making people nervous. He had liked being feared. Meanwhile, Jennifer was building her case methodically and publicly. She appeared on a regional news program, speaking calmly and professionally about the importance of police accountability. She didn't attack Ryan personally. She didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. "This isn't about one bad officer," she told the interviewer. "This is about a system that allowed misconduct to continue for years without consequences. Multiple people filed complaints. Multiple people tried to speak up. And they were all ignored. That's what we need to change." The interview went viral locally. People started reaching out to Jennifer with even more stories. Not just about Ryan, but about other officers in other towns who had done similar things. Jennifer referred them to other attorneys, to advocacy groups, to anyone who could help. She was building something bigger than just one lawsuit. She was starting a movement. The state attorney general's office opened a formal criminal investigation. They subpoenaed records from the police department. They interviewed witnesses. They reviewed hundreds of traffic stops and citations going back 5 years. What they found was damning. Clear patterns of racial profiling, evidence of falsified reports, documentation of searches conducted without proper legal justification. Ryan watched it all unfold like a slow-motion car crash. He couldn't look away, but he couldn't stop it either. His lawyer kept pushing him toward a settlement, toward some kind of plea deal that might let him avoid prison. But Ryan resisted. Some part of him still believed he could fight this, still believed his connections and his reputation would save him. That belief died the day the district attorney's office announced they would be filing criminal charges. Violation of civil rights, false reporting, abuse of authority. Each charge carried potential prison time. Ryan sat in his apartment that night alone in the dark, finally understanding what Jennifer had known from the beginning. His badge hadn't made him untouchable. It had just delayed the inevitable. And now, with that badge gone, he had nothing left to hide behind. The plea deal came 6 months after Jennifer first filed her lawsuit. 6 months of investigations, depositions, media coverage, and mounting pressure. 6 months of Ryan Mitchell watching his entire life crumble piece by piece. His lawyer had finally convinced him there was no other choice. The evidence was overwhelming. The state had dashcam footage, witness testimony, documented complaints, and even statements from other officers who had seen Ryan's behavior but never reported it. If the case went to trial, Greg explained, Ryan would almost certainly be convicted on multiple felony charges. He could be looking at 5 to 10 years in prison. The plea deal was harsh, but it was better than the alternative. Ryan would plead guilty to 3 counts of civil rights violations and 2 counts of filing false reports. He would serve 18 months in county jail. He would surrender his law enforcement certification permanently, meaning he could never work as a police officer again, anywhere in the country. He would pay substantial fines, and he would be required to cooperate fully with the ongoing civil lawsuit. Ryan sat in the courtroom on the day he entered his plea, wearing a suit instead of his uniform. He looked smaller somehow, like the absence of the badge had physically diminished him. When Judge Thompson asked him if he understood the charges and the consequences, Ryan's voice was barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." "And how do you plead?" There was a long pause. Ryan closed his eyes. "Guilty." Jennifer was in the courtroom that day. She sat in the back watching as justice was finally served. She didn't feel triumphant or celebratory. Mostly she felt tired. This case had consumed her life for months, and while she was glad it was over, she also knew the real work was just beginning. The civil lawsuit was settled 2 months later. The town of Millbrook and its insurance company agreed to pay a significant settlement, not just to Jennifer, but to all 14 plaintiffs who had come forward. The exact amount was confidential, but sources familiar with the case said it was well into 7 figures. More importantly, the settlement included mandatory reforms for the Millbrook Police Department. New policies on traffic stops and searches, better training on constitutional rights, an independent oversight committee with the power to investigate complaints, body cameras for all officers, regular audits of citation patterns to identify potential profiling or misconduct. Chief Patterson announced his retirement shortly after the settlement was finalized. He gave a press conference where he took partial responsibility for not addressing the problems sooner. "We failed the community," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "We failed to listen when people tried to tell us something was wrong. That ends now." The new police chief was a woman named Lisa Chen, who had previously worked in a larger city with strong accountability measures. One of her first acts was to personally apologize to every victim of Ryan's misconduct. She met with them individually, listened to their stories, and promised that things would be different. Ryan served his sentence at the county jail. It was the longest 18 months of his life. He was kept separate from the general population for his own safety, which meant spending most of his time alone in a small cell. He had a lot of time to think, to reflect on the choices that had led him there. Some days he still tried to justify what he had done. He told himself he had just been doing his job, that he had been trying to keep people safe. But on other days, usually late at night when sleep wouldn't come, he faced the truth. He had abused his power because he liked it. He had hurt people because he could, and now he was paying the price. When Ryan was released, he didn't stay in Millbrook. He couldn't. Everyone knew who he was and what he had done. He moved 3 states away, to a city where nobody recognized his name. He got a job doing security at a shopping mall, checking bags and watching cameras. It was humbling work, especially for someone who had once carried a badge and a gun. But it was all he could find with his record. He still thought about Millbrook sometimes, about the life he had lost, about the respect he used to command. But mostly he tried not to think about it at all. The past was painful, and dwelling on it only made things worse. Jennifer's life went in a completely different direction. The case had reminded her why she became a lawyer in the first place. She had taken time off to rest and recover, but she realized that rest wasn't what she needed. Purpose was what she needed, and fighting injustice gave her that purpose. She used part of her settlement money to open a legal aid clinic in Millbrook. It was a small office on Main Street with a simple sign that read, Community Legal Services. The clinic offered free legal representation to people who couldn't afford a lawyer, especially in cases involving police misconduct, discrimination, or civil rights violations. The clinic was busy from day one. People came in with stories of being treated unfairly, of being intimidated by those in power, of not knowing where to turn for help. Jennifer and the 2 young attorneys she hired listened to every story and helped where they could. Sometimes that meant filing a lawsuit. Other times it meant simply writing a letter or making a phone call. But always it meant standing up for people who needed someone on their side. The case became well known beyond Millbrook. Legal websites wrote about it. Law schools used it as a teaching example. Jennifer was invited to speak at conferences about police accountability and civil rights litigation. She always accepted these invitations, not because she enjoyed public speaking, but because she wanted other people to know that standing up to injustice was possible. A lot of people think they're powerless against the system, she told a room full of law students during one presentation. They think that police officers, government officials, people with badges and authority are untouchable. But they're not. Nobody is above the law. It takes courage to stand up and it takes persistence, but change is possible. I've seen it happen. The students always asked her the same question. Weren't you scared? Jennifer always gave them the same honest answer. Yes, I was terrified. But I was also angry, and that anger gave me strength. What Ryan Mitchell did to me wasn't right. What he did to all those other people wasn't right. And I knew that if I didn't do something, he would just keep doing it. Sometimes you have to be brave not because you're fearless, but because doing nothing is worse than being afraid. Years passed. Millbrook changed. The police department, under Chief Chen's leadership, became a model for other small-town departments. Complaints dropped dramatically. Community trust increased. Officers received regular training on de-escalation, cultural sensitivity, and constitutional rights. The Oversight Committee reviewed every use of force incident and every formal complaint, ensuring transparency and accountability. Some of the officers who had worked with Ryan remained on the force. They had to adapt to the new culture, the new expectations. Some embraced the changes. Others left, unable or unwilling to adjust. But the department was better for it. Jennifer continued her work at the legal clinic. Over the years, she helped hundreds of people navigate the legal system, fight discrimination, and assert their rights. Not every case was as dramatic as her confrontation with Ryan Mitchell, but each one mattered. Each one represented someone who had been heard, someone who had been helped, someone who had learned that justice was possible. She never forgot the night of that traffic stop. The feeling of being powerless, of being intimidated by someone who thought his badge made him invincible. But she had learned something important that night. Power only works if people are too afraid to challenge it. And once you find the courage to stand up, once you refuse to back down, that power starts to crack. Ryan Mitchell had thought his badge made him untouchable. He had spent years building a reputation, collecting favors and intimidating anyone who questioned him. But in the end, all it took was one person who refused to be intimidated, one person who knew the law and wasn't afraid to use it, one person who understood that real power doesn't come from a badge or a position. It comes from standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. The story of what happened in Millbrook became a reminder that accountability matters, that oversight matters, that listening to people when they say something is wrong matters, and most importantly, that ordinary citizens have more power than they realize if they're willing to use it. Jennifer still drives past that spot on Highway 47 sometimes, the spot where Ryan pulled her over all those years ago. Every time she does, she remembers how scared she was that night. But she also remembers what happened next, how she chose to fight instead of accepting injustice, how that one choice changed everything. And she smiles, knowing that somewhere out there, someone else is having their own moment of decision. Someone else is being told they're powerless, that they can't win against the system. And maybe, just maybe, they'll remember this story. They'll remember that change is possible, that courage matters, and that nobody, absolutely nobody, is truly untouchable.